Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Emotional Clearinghouse. I'm Dr. Sobel Bunis, and I'd like to welcome you all today to a very powerful conversation that's part of a series of conversations that we have called Astrology as a Healing Guide. And specifically today is called The Spirit of Cancer. Now, Beth and I have already done the Spirit of Taurus, the Spirit of Gemini, and now we're in Cancer. We're just going to keep on rolling through the calendar. So as always, I am delighted to have my wonderful friend, Beth McDonald, here. She's a friend, she's a colleague, she's a fabulous woman. And we have been collaborating together for 30 years with our patients, with our clients, using her gifts, my gifts. We've been bringing them to bear for people. It's been an amazing partnership. And so we wanted to share all of this with you as much as we can, download all of her knowledge that we've gleaned in the last 30 years. So where we're going to start today is, first of all, if you are born under the sign of Cancer, of course you're here. If you weren't and you've got friends or loved ones, or you'd like friends or loved ones in the sign of Cancer, also you're welcome. And as Beth has really schooled me, we all have Cancer somewhere in our charts. We all have something, everything in our charts. And there's always something to learn and to relate to in these conversations. So Beth, I'm handing it over to you. I'm going to ask you to give yourself, give everybody a little bit of background about yourself, and I will. And then we're going to jump in. And folks, we have got a lot of juicy conversation to have today. There's a lot of material. So I'm passing it over to you, Beth. Take it away, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Sobel, and welcome everybody. I just want to remind you that we love your questions. Sobel and I are famous for being chatterboxes. Like, we could talk for hours. And as I've said to some of you over the last couple of weeks and months, we are so close to this material, we forget what it's like to be new. And we really want, especially now with COVID and being an election year and so many things going on with our lives and our families and so much change, people need more support. And we want to be responsive to the kind of things that you guys want and need. So please, definitely, if you've got questions, type them in, and we'll, we've got a lovely set of topics, things to do and notes. But if you've got questions, we're happy to deviate from the plan. So with that said, I have a Cancer moon. And so the moon rules the mother, mothering, all these kinds of things, home and family. And so when I started to look at how I wanted to introduce myself this time, honest to God, the spirit of my Uncle Fred showed up, and Uncle Fred was the one who first parted the veil for me. And psychic abilities run in my family. And so in deference to Uncle Fred, I'm starting in a different place today. And that is that, psychic abilities run in my family. I have been psychic since I was a child. And it wasn't always easy. My family was descended of poor sharecroppers in the rural South, and then my father went into the military, and we would always go back to the farm when my dad was deployed because it was safer there. And my mother had a real hard time with it. And the only thing I remember about that time is my mother and her sisters and sister-in-laws and my grandma fighting in the living room and my little baby sister crying. And so I would always go running to, Cancer rules family. And when you need, welcome, Sherry. Thanks for joining us. When you need, especially when you're little, when you need help, when you need support, where do you go first? To your family. It's not always the best choice, but you go there first. And my Uncle Fred took me in the kitchen that day, and he sat me on his lap, and he pulled his wrist. He had a pocket watch, a gold pocket watch, out of his overalls, and he handed it to me. And then, the wall of the kitchen just disappeared, and I could see out into the yard, and I could see all these spirits and ancestors out there, souls I didn't know, but the vibrational tone was so pure and so high and so different from what was going on in the living room. And granted, I was probably about 2.5, and so I don't remember exact verbiage, but basically what he said to me was, your family loves you, but humans are always going to disappoint you. And life is hard. This is Earth. It's not easy here. And this is where you go. You always go to the spirit world. You always go to God. You always lean there. Like, love your people, but don't discount some of the greatest sources of guidance and support and love that there is for you on this planet. And then later, when I started studying under different healing traditions in the South African shamanic tradition, it's considered, and a lot of Aboriginal cultures too, that your ancestors are the biggest, most powerful spirit guides you have. And that so resonates for me with Cancer, the sign of Cancer, again, because Cancer is family. And you have family in a couple of different places. One of them's here on the planet, one of them's across the veil on the other side. And so just in general in your life, don't overlook the ancestor spirits in your rituals and prayers and meditations and whatever, your altar work, whatever that is, but also especially around your own healing and working with your family. And family issues are more and more and more important now, again, because of COVID and a lot of things that are going on. And so I started out as a psychic, but I took up astrology as a lark when my son was about 2 or 3 years old. And I took the class because a lot of my girlfriends were doing it. I stayed because my son was not responding to a lot of the stuff the pediatrician was telling me, but the astrology instructors were like, oh, he's a quadruple Leo, do this. And their stuff worked. So I fired the pediatrician and I took up astrology, and I feel much better about my parenting. And so again, part of being a mother or the matriarch of your tribe is really leaning in and listening in and being responsive in the moment. And sometimes what the experts are telling you isn't the thing. We are all different. That's another thing that kept me with astrology and going deeper and deeper and deeper, because it helped explain the ways in which we're all unique and special and different. And to be okay with that. A lot of us really struggle with that. And I know I'm going to toss it back to you right now for a minute, Sobel, just talking about, how you help people make peace with their path and their, whatever their, my grandmama used to say, whatever your cross is to bear, whatever your row is to hoe, it's, yeah, there's a lot that you do to help people make peace with whatever their personal struggles are with existing life in a planet,
Great, honey. Well,
Yes.
Thank you for that. And I Uncle Fred. Oh my God, I never had an Uncle Fred. I had other uncles, but none of them with a pocket watch and the overalls that made the wall disappear. That's an amazing
He was awesome. He was my favorite. He was a great uncle. Yeah, it was.
Thank you, Uncle Fred. But as a Leo, I'd like to apologize to you and express my sincere condolences at having a son with so much Leo. Sure. And it's interesting because I have never had children of my own, but I am so much a mother, and I have many, many, many children in my life who consider me the other mother. And I also have had this 35 years of family practice where I've had the privilege of being really deeply intimate with family systems. And because I started out as a chiropractor who was doing a lot of nutritional work, but also emotional clearing, it gave me the tools to really be a true holistic family doctor and to step into the family system and offer, a very, very deep level of process and healing. And so I have assisted so many families in raising children, even though I never raised my own. And it's been really precious. And I say to women, young women out there who aren't really sure or certain they want to have children, it's okay to not have your own children. Right. There are so many ways to contribute to children in your life. And I'm a walking, breathing example of it. And it's been really, really precious. So, I was very fortunate to have, right out of school, be turned on to emotional clearing work. And that's where Beth and I have really collaborated so well, because the astrology gives, and your psychic abilities give us such an intuition and an insight into things that are going on with people that I could then take the emotional clearing and apply it to those issues. It's been very powerful. And I know this whole opportunity that we've had to offer this to people to say, look, let's just have this conversation in public and let people have the benefit of the years of wisdom and experience. So I'd like to say to everybody, when Beth and I first got together about cancer, the very first thing she said to me was, cancer rules compassion. And Beth and I started talking right away about the state of the world and how if I could wave my magic wand, I would bring compassion into the world where everybody had the ability to be compassionate and non-reactive with each other so that we could really hear each other. And we all are aware how divisive our world is right now, especially, I can't speak for other countries, but boy, in this country, it sure is obvious. And people are expressing opinions, but instead of just having an opinion and saying, here's my opinion, what's your opinion, and being okay and respectful, everybody is expressing opinions and totally reacting to each other, getting furious with each other, judging each other, and blowing each other off. And I believe, from my experience and my point of view, that our opinions are actually emotionally triggering each other. That your opinion is making me threatened. Your opinion is making me fearful or feel dread. So it's my goal to bring as much healing of that fear and those reactions to the world so that we can be with each other, that we can be compassionate with each other. We can say, oh, you have a different point of view, but I now understand your point of view. And I can see that we have more in common than we have differences. And let's move forward together in a healing way for this planet and for our communities with things in common and with the differences and still be able to be a community and work together. So that's the bigger vision for what we're
That's the bigger picture, and that's the thing. Yay, thank you, Kathy. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. This is one of the things that we have worked so hard towards over the years, but especially since probably 2015, 2016, and then with COVID, we have to, as individuals, take responsibility for the ways and places where our emotions prevent us from having calm, rational, adult conversations with people of differing opinions so that we can solve the problem. We've gotten really good at talking at each other and not solving anything. And we need to figure out how to stay calm, stay grounded, stay centered, stay positive, stay constructive. And it's always the old emotions, old post-traumatic stress that gets in the way. And the tricky part is, one of the reasons we work so well together is that whenever you're involved with humans, you're going to get confronted from time to time on things that other people find unpleasant or distasteful. And it can be very difficult sometimes to know when to listen and take that in and really work with it, and when to deal with in a different way, in a more constructive way, with someone else's projections or someone else's unhealed parts. Right. And that's one of the things that I like so much about astrology, because it gives you a lot of cues and clues, tools and techniques to kind of discern where you need to dig in and where you need to just say, okay, let's take a time out. That's not resonating with me right now, from a place that's not defended. And that's so hard. That is so hard. And so with that said, I want to talk for a minute about astrology and the kind that I practice, because there are a ton of different schools of thought out there. Yes. Just like with every religion, there's different sets and subsets. Like there's so many different kinds of Presbyterians and Methodists and Jews, and like there's astrology is the same way, only it's worse because it's older. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. And then you throw the cultures in. Like some of the most popular ones are the Mayan and the Vedic from India and the Chinese astrology. And there's places where they all overlap, which I love because it makes my job easier. But there's a lot of different places out there And so again, I just want to reiterate with you guys, if you get a reading from somebody or you read a book that really doesn't work for you, file it for future reference. It may later, and try something new, especially along your bloodline or what they call your blood root. There are cultural things that are always in play, or past life stuff. And so, like, for example, I am not of Chinese descent. However, I found out I had a couple of past lives in China, and periodically their astrology really resonates for me. And so I don't know enough to really be helpful, but I know people who do, and so that's a good thing. I practice the Western psychological astrology, the part that comes down through, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Rome, Greece, to Christianity, to the birth of psychotherapy, Carl Jung, Dane Rudhyar, a lot of people like that. And I don't want to spend tons of time on it, though I'm a Gemini and I love esoteric details, and the esoteric details on this are fascinating. For those of you who are interested in learning more, this Astrology Encyclopedia by James Lewis is a very, very good tool to have. And they have the best, most comprehensive description of the history and evolution of Western psychological astrology that I've ever seen. And so for any of you out there who need a book, that's a good one. Also, just straight up, the Wikipedia page on Western psychological astrology is good. So with that said, it was designed by healers for healers. And by the time we got into the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, they were incorporating the karmic pieces, the life lesson pieces, into the next wave of psychotherapy, which was what they call transpersonal psychology. Straight psychology is just this lifetime. Transpersonal psychology is all the other ones plus this one. And so again, for places where you have blind spots and you're well defended, or you keep having the same problems come up over and over again and you cannot solve them, the combination of looking at where that lives in your birth chart and your transits and your solar returns, and then we make a little list and we take it to people like Sobel, and she'll say, "Oh, I will help you make that go away," and she does, and it's lovely. And so with that said, again, the realm of Cancer is a lot about compassion, the compassion of the mother, of the maternal line, that a good mother and a good grandmother, good aunties are supposed to have. But for a lot of us, it's hard to actualize. It's hard it's easier said than done. And a lot of that does come from a variety of different cultural things. And I'm wondering, Sobel, would this be a good time to talk about some of the ancestral pieces? Because so much of what we are, so much of what we think we should be as women, as aunties, as mothers and grandmothers and whatnot, is not only like a lot of nonverbal unconscious programming, but a lot of it also comes from our gene pool, from our DNA.
Exactly. Yeah. The ancestral piece is huge. And, I sort of came into it through the back door with a very long time patient of mine in Santa Barbara. And she had a lot of issues stemming from abuse in childhood. And one day, it just in conversation as we were working, we came up with this idea of seeing if she was carrying any ancestral sort of residue, and being aware. I mean, it just opened up this whole pathway for us, and we started exploring it. And then down the road, and we were able to clear things for her that up until that point hadn't quite cleared. Like, we thought we had gotten to the root of something, but the ancestral piece was a missing link.
Yeah.
For me personally as well, the ancestral piece, once I was advised by a healer to look into it, it helped me discover and clear a level of fear and anxiety that I've been carrying my whole life, but it made no sense. It
Right.
You looked at my life and the parents I grew up with, where I grew up with, all of my childhood, there was nothing in it to justify this low level of fear and anxiety. But the ancestral piece connected me up to, you know, the trauma that my people went through, that for whatever reason that I was the sensitive one in my family, right? I was the one that carried it. And I was terrified of things that no one could figure out. But that final ancestral piece made a huge difference. Now, there's a book out there, and the book is titled It Didn't Begin With You, or It Didn't Start With You. And finally, the science is starting to really document how
Right.
trauma, even way back in our history, can change DNA and therefore can come down through the generations. Now, in terms of ancestral trauma that women are carrying, I mean, let's think about the fact that we barely had the right to vote for how long now? Over just over 100 years?
Yeah.
For as long as we can look back historically, women have been unable to make choices for their own life, unable to choose whether they want to be married, who they get to marry, whether they want to have children. All of these, issues, women have been considered to be property.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the 1960s that women could apply for their own credit card.
Bank accounts and credit cards. Yeah.
Relatively new in our history that we
Yeah.
as women have the kind of choice and power to design our lives. So the fact is that a lot of us are carrying these echoes or residue of ancestral trauma as women that is in our nervous systems. It responds incredibly well to clearing, emotional clearing, and it responds incredibly well to doing rituals and processing in your own ceremonial way as well. But to acknowledge it is really important. And yeah, so absolutely, it's a key piece now, and it's going to get more and more attention, and it's going to be that missing link for more and more people, especially for women, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we have a question. Thank you, Kathy, about describing Cancer characteristics in someone's sun, moon, and rising. Perfect. Okay, so what I want to start with is generic and then get to the 3 different sections.
Perfect.
Right. Okay. So Cancer is ruled by the crab, and there's a lot of really interesting mythology around this one. Some of them only have one myth that goes on for thousands of years. The Cancer mythology is very diverse and it's fascinating. And if you haven't studied it, I'd encourage you to do so. But the biggest thing for me, the short form, is look at the glyph. Look at what Cancer is. Cancer is the crab. Crabs are tough on the outside. They have an exoskeleton, and then they're soft and tender and mushy on the inside. And so anybody with a lot of the sign of Cancer on the outside is going to be tough as nails when they need to be, like a mother is when she has to discipline the kids or lay down the law or do the mama bear thing when someone's threatening her cubs. It's Cancer has this amazing ability to be like Marine Corps tough when you need to be, but also so soft and so sweet and so tender and so loving, when need be. And so whether you have a sun, moon, or rising in Cancer, or a stellium somewhere else that doesn't involve the top 3, this is going to be a big life lesson for you. Discernment, picking your battles, being judicious. When do I attack and how? Picking your battles, picking battles you can win. Don't be Don Quixote tilting at windmills all the time. For Cancers, that's a big lesson. It can be a bigger lesson for those with a Cancer sun, because the sun rules your ego. Your ego is kind of a construct. Your rising sign is more of your id. Your id is your truer nature, who you are left to your own devices. And so the tricky part with in the differentiating between the struggles of a Cancer sun and the struggles of a Cancer rising is going to have more autonomic instincts about like charging into the fray, where the Cancer sun, it's going to be more programmed. Like they somehow thought they had to be that way. It has more to do with indoctrination and what they took away from their childhood. Some of the things we learned, our parents deliberately tried to teach us, right or wrong. Other things were just that children learn what they live poem, where it's like, wow, mama never said that, but she sure did that, and so I do it too. Ooh, yeah. Does that make sense?
It does. And what I want to add to that is one of the things I've learned from Beth is that every time you talk about a specific sign, whether it's sun, moon, or rising, or wherever it is, there's this concept of that quality being in balance or out of balance.
Out of balance.
Extreme on either end. And so when I read Beth sent me like 14 pages of notes on Cancer. It was amazing. And when I looked at this tough tender, and I looked at the tough part, I think of tough being defensive.
Yeah.
Right. But defensive as in a reaction, like it's like something that you are carrying in your past, whether it's this life, past life, ancestral, cultural, wherever that comes from. Once you get triggered, you're defending in a really powerful reactive way, but it doesn't give you a lot of power because you have no control over it.
Right.
It's survival.
It's
and then
survival.
On the tender side, right? The tender side, I thought of, what's the extreme of tender? The extreme of tender is having no boundaries around your emotions, what we call oversympathetic. That's a pancreas meridian emotion, which ties in later when you talk about the physical ailments with Cancer, it's going to tie in there. So on the emotional clearing level, that's where I can help someone be non-reactive or heal the root of the extreme edge of that quality. And then that quality comes more into balance. It becomes an asset rather than a liability. Does that make sense, Beth? Is that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's so fun. It's so funny because so much of the time when you look at the myth, like one of the myths is like the crab was in the wrong place at the wrong time when Hercules was fighting a monster, and Hercules stepped on his foot or stepped on the crab, and then the crab pinched him and Hercules killed him. That's like such a classic example of like, discernment would be just like, these two like superhero monster people are fighting. I'll just get out of the way. Again, with the downside of being too sensitive is like we can be paralyzed and not move and then react in the exact wrong way. And so, again, you're right. The Cancers can be the most beautiful, most soft, most sensitive, intuitive, spiritual, creative, all that water sign yumminess, on a good day. And then it can turn on a dime. And that's kind of how you know that you may be out of balance here. If you go from 0 to 60 too fast and people are giving you feedback about that, right. That's a thing. So I see this other question about the sun, your sun, Sherry, but I want to finish the other piece about the moon. Now, the third piece of your psychological makeup in astrology is your ego, your id, and the moon. The moon represents your heart, your way of loving, your love language, how you give and receive love. And again, Cancer can be very, very sweet, very, very sensitive, very generous, very kind, very loving. But then again, if they're out of power, if they're out of balance, they can be very hard, Sherry, like you're saying, on themselves and others, and it can seem to come out of nowhere. And it's important to understand where that comes from. And again, the moon also rules your mother and your parenting style. And so again, that's where me having a Cancer moon resonated so much with that astrologer who was like, he's got all these planets in Leo. He needs to be held. He's not going to cry it out. They kept telling me to put him down, put him in the back, let him cry. And the boy would cry for hours and it would gut me. I was like, no, I'm not doing that to him. It's torture. Well, he needs love. He needs to be loved. And often, especially a male person with a Cancer sun or a lot of Cancer in their birth chart, you know, Cancer is a feminine sign. And when you're a male in a sign that's more feminine or vice versa, you're going to have struggles with what we call integration. You have to really, they need a lot of help into, especially men, because it's better than it was when we were growing up, but men are still expected to be a little more John Wayne, a little more Clint Eastwood than any of us are comfortable with. And so they can really judge themselves and they can really struggle. And so a young man with a lot of the sign of Cancer needs a lot of validation that it's okay to have these feelings, and they're actually an asset. If you can learn to listen to them, they can help you in this way or another way.
Yeah, and I would say that, you know, men in particular deal with that issue about not being trained to be okay with their emotions. But in general, I would say, in all my years of practice, so many people, men and women, growing up, were told,
Right.
in sometimes overtly and in other
Right.
ways relative to their parents' behavior, that their feelings were not valid. It was not okay to express their feelings. I mean, a lot of people were literally told, "You don't feel that way," or "You
Right.
should feel that way," or
Right.
so their
Right.
feelings were negated. So
Right.
this beautiful, intuitive person with a sense of emotion, begging and wanting to be expressed, getting shut down like that. And
Yeah.
so, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
it ties in perfectly with that.
So,
Is there another question you want to answer?
yeah. Yay. All right. So the question is, when communicating or interacting with a Cancer who is in defensive mode, is there anything that could help easing them back to their tender side? And so for me, there's a couple of things. Depending on who the person is and how well you know them, there's three things I usually recommend, and I'm just going to spit them out. They're not in any particular order. One is humor, but you have to be careful, because sometimes things we think are humorous are not necessarily funny to everybody. And so if you know what the other person thinks is funny, or if you have a frame of reference, like, for example, a couple of the men in my family have a lot of the sign of Cancer, but they also like film. Like, one of the things we've been able to do as a family is watch, like, Star Wars or you know, James Bond or some of the movies and stuff like that. And so throwing lines from movies out can be an incredible icebreaker. It can be a code, like, hey, I see this and I don't want to pick a fight, but, like, hey, this is the exact vibrational tone that we got going on right now. And sometimes it can just change the energy. So humor, and whatever kind of humorous ground rules you have with that person, or begin to experiment with it. Oh, this reminds me of that comedian. Do you know that guy? He always says this, you know, whatever it is. But, like, humor is huge. Another is what they call reflective listening. And this is where I'm going to Gemini geek out again. I'm sorry. Gemini rules communication. And one of my biggest struggles between being a psychic and being a Gemini is, like, the Cassandra complex. What happens when you're right and no one can hear you? So you have to explore and experiment with different kinds of communication. And so one of them is reflective listening, where you just reflect back to them. Oh, wow. Are you mad? Is everything okay? You know, that sounded a little edgy. Did I upset you? Did I do something wrong? Like, tell me more about that. Ask, like you would, like, as a journalist, where it's just like, you don't respond to whatever they just said with a comment. You respond with a question. Even if, and I do this all the time, because a lot of times it hits me as such a surprise. I can't think of the words fast enough. So I buy time with tell me more. Can you tell me more about that? I really want to make sure I understand. And if you can, in the last several years, I've always been encouraging people to use the L word more. Say, I love you. And tell me more. I love you and I want to understand this because I get it. This is important to you. Use the L word. Thank you, Hillary. It's so powerful and validating. And it's one of the easier methods. Maybe it's because that was one of the first ones I studied, and I'm 60 something now. And it's like, okay, I've had a lot of practice, but that's a huge one. Don't be afraid to tell people that you love them, or a side door is like, I've always loved this about you, or I've always loved that about you. Tell me more about, I've always loved the way you perceive things or your take on things. Tell me more. You're so smart, or you're so well versed in this topic. Ask them to explain themselves. And I think one of the reasons that method is so powerful is because it I think has its roots first back to Freud, because Freud was the one who was like, non-intervention. The best thing you can do is just listen to somebody and be the mirror. But most of us are so needy. It's like we need someone to listen to us. And so, there's a Freudian piece that I think it really is a contributing factor to the power here, that one of the best things you can do is just be present with someone and listen, ask questions. But then you go back to the Aboriginal and the shamanic tradition, and it's, there's always a piece of listening without prejudice, where it's just like, explain to us, explain to the members of your tribe what's going on for you, because we can't help if we don't know.
Right. And then you reflect it back to them until they feel that they've been heard.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. You have to say what it is, and then you have to repeat it back to them in a way that they get, that
Right.
you actually heard the communication. The other piece here that I'd like to add in, and I love what you're saying, is that sometimes in one of these situations, both people are triggered.
Oh, yeah.
I see this all the time in my couples work. And if you're the one that has the awareness that this is what's happened, what you can do, if you can observe yourself enough to recognize, oh dear, we're both triggered, what you can say to the other person is, look, I recognize that I'm triggered right now emotionally, and I'm more upset than I can be in order to have a loving, deep conversation with you. So respectfully, what I'd like to do is step out of the conversation and allow myself a little bit of time to let these emotions calm down and then come back. How would that be for you? So you're not blaming anyone. You're actually taking it on yourself.
Right.
To say, hey, I'm not, this is not a great way for me to communicate with you. Can I take a little time? And that can work. Yeah.
Right. And I want to even add to that. I studied under a guy a while back who used to take that one step further and say and use a piece called closing the loop, where it's like, look, I realize I'm not showing up in this conversation the way I want to. So I want to step back for a bit and sort that out so I can show back up the way I want to. And how about Thursday at 10? So that seriously, so it's not just hanging out, and then you're taking responsibility for circling back around in a way that person feels like you're not blowing them off. Like, you matter to me. I love you. I care about this. I don't want this between us. And I just need time to figure out how to be a grown-up again, because I lost that. And how about Thursday at 10, or over the weekend, let's do dinner at Brophy's or whatever. And let's sort this out, or
let's Brophy's. I like that.
Let's go have some calamari, man. It's awesome. Let's have some crab.
Have some crab. So, what I like to ask about, if you feel this, does this feel complete to you, this piece?
Yeah.
I want to make sure we get to talk about people, illnesses, and tendencies that cancer.
Right.
Because I found I want to make sure people can understand how things being out of balance in your sign can lead to certain kinds of physical problems, and the emotional connection to that. I'd love people to have that if that seems good.
Right, right. Okay. For that, I want to start with what they call the defining statement.
Yes.
Each sign has what's called a defining statement. It's their internal psychological drive. And it's like a mission statement that's said to inform their most basic drives. And Cancer has two. One of them is I feel. They are more driven by their feelings than by their logic. They're kind of the opposite of Gemini. And so with Geminis, you got to say, get out of your head, honey. Let's get back. How do you feel right now? With Cancers, when they're upset or sick, it's like, okay, clearly there's some deep emotion going on here, and let's see if we can sort that out. The other piece that is a defining statement for Cancer is I secure. Ultimately, they want to feel secure within themselves, within their families, and within the extended family. Now, whether that's economic security, emotional security, food security, because Cancer also rules food. It's you're gonna want to reassure them that their feelings are valid and that they are safe and secure. They need safety and security like nobody's business. And so, with that said, again, physical and golly, this is so huge. Cancer on the physical level rules. God, this is so big for me. I'm sorry. I'm flashing back to all these people and clients and things, especially now. But in its most elemental, because Cancer rules the mother, it rules the lady parts, the breasts, the belly, the womb, the uterus, and then the diseases of that. By the same token, because Cancer rules aspects of nourishment, again, the breasts nourish, and in its most, and so you're gonna people with a lot of Cancer in their natal charts are going to have to spend more time on their reproductive health. And especially if you're a woman with strong Cancer, don't skip your sonograms and your mammograms and your self checks. That's a huge thing. And this is where, by the same token, it will rule ailments of this. And where this plays out a lot for me has to do with fertility issues, conception, especially women. They get cysts and fibroids and different kinds of things. It rules pregnancy, birth, childbirth, pregnancy loss. And this is where it was so tricky for me. And Sobel, I have to thank you for being so supportive. In the last couple of weeks, it blows me away. Again, back to how mathematical astrology can be. The Supreme Court waited until everything moved over into Cancer to do the latest decision about Roe versus Wade. And so I feel my phone blew up that weekend. And for those of us that are beyond childbearing, it's not a problem for us per se, but for our daughters and our granddaughters, what they do, what they can do is challenged. And it's very difficult for women to stand in the face of watching rights reversed when we fought so hard for the things that we have. And so I'm seeing a lot of women who are in the midst of that women's rage. It's a branch of existential emotion called women's rage, where it's just like, periodically we need a little help around how hard it is to be in a female body on this planet. And so if you're having that, that's a thing.
Something about that, about women's rage.
Yeah.
That ties in so perfectly. You and I spoke about this point, and I wanted to make sure women know about this because it's such a classic thing, where the emotions and the body connect. After all these years of practice, I have to say that when I'm doing emotional clearing with someone and I keep seeing the same pattern of emotions showing up, like they're always on the liver meridian or they're always on the pancreas meridian,
right,
told they also have those physical issues.
right.
Classic thing about women's rage is what I have seen is that women have been raised, although that's changing. But again, if we look at the ancestral and the cultural history,
Yeah.
they've not been raised to be angry, to
Right.
express anger. It's okay to be hurt, but not to be angry. And so I've seen that, a lot of times when I've done emotional clearing with women, so much comes back to the liver and gallbladder emotions, anger, resentment, and frustration. And of course, depression as well. And a lot of people feel that depression is just anger turned inward.
Right.
What I've noticed is in chiropractic school, they taught us about what they call the 4 Fs. And the 4 Fs have to do with, about when women develop gallbladder problems and they need to have their gallbladder taken out. So the 4 Fs stand for 40, because it happens around age 40, fat, fertile, meaning still in their reproductive years, and flatulent, meaning, hey, F for farting, gas, right? So the 4 Fs were the sign, these 4 things, when they all converge, women would end up with gallbladder full of stones, and they would end up in excruciating pain and end up having their gallbladders up. What I felt it was all about was unexpressed rage, unexpressed anger. There's no reason for a gallbladder to just crap out at age 40. There's no reason for it, no physical reason for it, and it's just such a classic thing. And on the other side, on the pancreas meridian, going back to the tender, the tough and tender, that tender part is where the oversympathy, the not having boundaries around emotions lives. And what I saw over and over again with women again was blood sugar issues, digestive issues, diabetes, and women who are oversympathetic and have these boundary issues with being so sensitive around other people's emotions. And then to tie it all in with the reproductive system, so many children who were born after a woman has had miscarriages have been, you talked about the replacement child, right? Like someone who's lost a child and then they have another child. And it made me think about how many people I've worked with who were a child after their mother had had 1 or 2 or 3 miscarriages. And so they were subject in utero, all of their mother's fears and worries and anxieties about having another child and would it be okay. And then this child very often is born and ends up taking on the role of mother and being caretaker for a mother who's, dealing with whatever, depression, bipolar disorder. So a lot of these children who are born with all of these sensitivities, all these issues, a lot of women end up becoming little mothers. And we all know women who grew up that way. They took care of the other kids and they took care of their own mother and they didn't get to be children themselves. And that whole thing of cancer being so caretaking to the point of not caring for themselves really touched me when you shared that. And that's how I see how it ties in with the emotional and the physical all in one big, connections.
And again, back to the whole digestive tract, digestive issues. If women are expected to be the nurturers and the nourishers, and so we often, the bridge between all these health issues and the women's rage is at some point we all hit a wall at least once, sometimes on a fairly regular basis, where it's like, okay, I'm just taking this one to the next level. But we have to face the places where we are not nourished the way we nourish. And I see this a lot in younger couples now. Women are figuring it out sooner than our generation did. But one of the leading causes of divorce right now is, and there's a lot of clinical research on this, is that women are expected to bring home half or more of an income, of the household income in a marriage, but the man still doesn't, the husband in a heterosexual marriage is not expected by the same token to do half the housework or half the child rearing. And so, and women aren't prepared for this. when they go into marriage, when they go into childbirth and child rearing and bringing children into the world. Younger women have an expectation that they are more equal than they truly are. And so where I see this playing out a lot is usually after the second child, where it's just like, oh my God, my career is taking a hit because women who marry and breed do not advance as fast in their careers. Again, there's a lot of clinical research on this, as women who are single, because they can put all that energy into there. And so, where I really see this happening is about after the second child, where women are having to face what they did. And usually, unless they're super perceptive and have a lot of like support, usually it happens at a more glacial pace, like ice melting in a glass. It takes time for it all to sink in and to be able to see with the wide angle lens what your reality is. And where I think Sobel and I have been so helpful, where I feel so validated, is being able to help these women say, look, honey, nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong with you. You didn't blow it. This is kind of where society failed you. And let's get you back on your feet. Let's get you clear. Let's get all this anger out. Let's help you to get back into your body, ground, center, and then we'll create a strategy for you moving forward. Sometimes the marriage is salvageable. Sometimes it's not, sometimes, men, yeah. One of the
you described for me about cancer, that tendency to be caring for others to the
and just keep
point
doing
of not
it.
caring for yourself.
Yeah.
And someone in that kind of a situation who also has a lot of cancer in their chart is going to be more susceptible to that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. And so that segues into some of the emotional issues. One of them is, creating relationships that nourish you as much as you nourish. Now, the tricky part is we can't always get the exact thing from a friend that we give them. The analogy I use is be in reality. If you need help, call me. I've got some really righteous prayers about like, help me to be in reality, help me to accept and embrace reality, that kind of thing. But I liken our families and our communities to the heroes in the Marvel Comics universe, where everybody has their superpower and everybody has their kryptonite. And it's on you to be in reality about your people. And it's like when you need someone to go play with you, to divert and distract and just go have a good time, go see a comedy show or a movie or something or whatever, it's on you to choose the right person to do that with. Because if you choose the person who has the least worst bad sense of humor to try and do that, and you have a miserable experience, that's on you. You have to be in reality about choosing.
Well, but that brings us right back to, and you said this was really an issue for cancer, is the whole notion of discernment.
Right.
I would say almost with every patient I've worked with doing emotional clearing, it comes down to a conversation about discernment. So we have this idea, when we say, we're judging a situation, people have this negative idea that judging is like a bad thing. But if you use the word discernment, then what it means is that you're in an non-reactive place, and you can actually look out there and you can look at that other person and say, is this the person to choose to share this with?
Right.
I find that over the years, I was one of those people. I don't know where I have cancer in my chart. You'll have to let me know. But yeah, I was the one who I had so much information and so much love of people and so much desire to help that people didn't even have to barely breathe for me to say, did you know you could heal those allergies? And here's what you do. And I didn't even know that they didn't really care about healing their allergies. I'm pouring myself out with information to someone who had no interest. And so the coach say to me, so you need to stop doing that. You're draining yourself and you're giving all this information to someone who doesn't want it. And that's when I started learning discernment. So I look over there and I judge. I think discernment is all about looking at the other person's capacity, not in a judgy way, but in a realistic way. Like you just said, get a little bit of reality. Like, is this the person that can handle and listen to this conversation? Well, maybe not. This person is. And so pick and you choose and you discern. And it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of, I'm so glad that came up in this whole cancer conversation because it's so critical for everyone.
It's so critical for everyone. And again, that lack of discernment can go back a ways. Cancers are also going to have a harder time with separation and individuation, those normal places where we learn to step back and be more autonomous and less sucked in. Right. It can also, Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising can also have more attachment issues, struggling with toxic and not toxic attachments, especially if there was trauma at your birth or around your mother's conception or pregnancy or fertility. You take on you can hear everything. You eat what she eats. You feel what she feels when you're in her womb. And the first big separation and individuation comes at birth. And if there was a problem there, then it's going to have a hard time. You're going to have a hard time feeling safe attaching to anybody else or removing or releasing in any way the levels of attachment to your mother or a mother figure.
Right.
People who struggle.
If in utero there was a twin, which is another fairly common.
Well, that's the other thing. Yeah, we've always got to cover that every time.
We should probably do a whole conversation just about the twin. But that's another situation. Talk about attachment issues, and also talk about coming into the world and feeling like you have to do for two. And that's another part of why people are giving and giving and giving and over caring to the point of not taking care of themselves to their own death. Are we close to running out of time? Oh my God, it's 2:56.
Okay, is there any other questions that anybody has before we wrap up? I want to thank you all for being here and for your questions. This was awesome. This was so cool. Awesome. Thank you for being here.
Right. So Beth, how do people reach you?
Oh, there we go. Okay. I have a website that is bethmcdonaldconsulting.com because bethmcdonald.com is a writer of vampire novels. So always be sure to add the consulting.com on that. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, and that's as far as I go.
Great. And I am available through my private practice for private emotional clearing sessions. My office number is 805-892-2400. And I also have the Emotional Clearinghouse, which is emotionalclearinghouse, all one word.com. And on my website, I have programs that people can purchase and do in their own time, in their own space, where I guide them through emotional clearing. I have one on relationships. It's called Healthy, Happy Relationships. I've one that's called Fear and Anxiety, which I hope it would someday go out of style when I get everybody cleared of fear. I have one on body image and weight and one on money and wealth. So, and look forward to Beth and I coming back July 28th. Am I right? At 1:00?
Yes, for Leo. We're going to do Leo.
And this Leo is really looking forward to it. And again, Beth, it's always a pleasure. I always
thank you so much.
I'm really excited, and I'm glad for all the wonderful questions we had. And so all of you, this will be replayed on my YouTube channel, which is also at Emotional Clearinghouse. And Beth, thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing all of you next time. Lots of
awesome.
Take care. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
For now.
For now.